Hi there, and welcome to an exclusive Asia Briefing vlog. My name is 𝗀𝗍𝗶𝗏, and I'll be your host for this clip. Throughout 2022, we'll be featuring our partner and parent company, Dezan Shira & Associates, as they celebrate their 30th anniversary this year. Each month, we'll feature a partner, expert, or guest as they discuss the firm's history to present-day story and business issues that firms face in today's thriving and rapidly developing Asia. Chris Devonshire-Ellis, founder and chairman, rejoins us this month to discuss one of the firm's most interesting stages when the firm expanded beyond China into the rest of Asia. Welcome back, Chris. Let's jump in. Dezan Shira broke the mold for foreign consulting firms in China by expanding very early on into other Asian countries. What prompted that step?
That was a decision made because we felt we had too many eggs in one basket at that time. We were already well established in China. We had an office in Hong Kong, and I think at the time 7 offices throughout mainland China, which to many people would have seemed enough. However, various economic issues elsewhere led us see that perhaps just concentrating on the China market could be problematic in case there were any problems with that. And we were right, because there were problems later on, the US tariff wars, for example, which came much later. But even so, we were nervous about just relying on one particular economy as a business. And we felt that we needed to expand and develop to reduce our China risk and spread that risk elsewhere, and the obvious location for us to do that was elsewhere in Asia.
Which countries did you consider first?
We after China, everything seems a bit small, and that we were a little intimidated actually by the thought perhaps of breaking out of China and going elsewhere. And we had a couple of curious incidents. So I was invited to Pyongyang in North Korea on a trade mission. I went 2 or 3 times actually. And this was at a time where North Korea was potentially going to open up. There was the potential for a presidential visit. Bill Clinton was president at the time, and the Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, who sadly passed away recently, actually made a trip to Pyongyang to sort this out. There was peace on the agenda, discussions about reunification with South Korea, and I was there at that time. Now, many people will recall that the next election, Al Gore was supposed to be Clinton's successor, but George W. Bush won in a very contentious vote. One of the first things that Bush said was that North Korea was part of an axis of evil, which prompted the North Korean government to really just retrench, and none of that potential for opening up occurred. But prior to that, the North Korean government had actually offered us a desk and telephone to set up a little Dezan Shira office in Pyongyang. That never happened, although we did subsequently handle a few North Korean clients, ginseng traders, opening up their offices in China. So North Korea was a curious one. It never happened, sadly. It would have been a lot of fun, I think. Mongolia was another one. I purchased property. I still have an apartment in Ulaanbaatar, and I looked at Mongolia very, very hard, really trying to make a business case for it. But at the end of the day, I couldn't work out how to get the cash flow into a business in Mongolia. It would be, we'd get some work, I suspected 1 or 2 months, and then we'd have no work for 5 months, and then we'd get another piece of, and you can't run a business like that. So sadly, we didn't set up in Mongolia either, although perhaps now or in future years that may well change. So North Korea and Mongolia were 2 which we looked at and we passed over. Then the thought occurred to us, and I remember discussing with Alberto we should really go for a country that's big, got because we're not intimidated by that. We weren't intimidated by the size of China. So where's big, got a huge workforce, and is set to be the next workshop of the world. And that was India. So we made plans, and we set up our first office outside of China, was in Mumbai, Bombay, in India. Now we have 3 offices there. So that's how that all happened. I think in the next issue of this series of webinars, Alberto will talk about how he entered the Vietnam market, but I set up originally our offices in India.
So having done this before, do you have a checklist of what businesses should look at when considering an investment into a new overseas market?
Yeah, it's important. For our business, we don't really want to work with local partners because you're not in control, and that can be problematic. We were quite a large firm at the time already, and we're certainly now a real multinational. So we need to impose our systems and our way of doing things, our corporate infrastructure, if you like, upon our operations outside of anywhere, so that they all match. Now, the best way to do that is to do that on your own. Now, that means that there's a huge amount of market research, internal market research, that needs to be done. I traveled extensively, as did other members of my staff at the time, from China to India. We took over parties of 7, 8, 9, 10 executives from China to India to see how they felt. We met up with a lot of people, some of whom will be interviewed later in this podcast. So we really did our research, and everything pointed to the fact that India, in fact, would be a suitable market for us. Again, it's a massive market and things are very different, but we weren't intimidated by that because we were coming out of China, and the same thing, it was just more of the same. Actually, India wasn't more of the same, as we were to find out. It's an extremely complex market. It's not as easy to do business in India as it is in China. But nonetheless, these are corporate challenges which we were able to face and overcome and deal with on our own. And I think that that was important. But the prerequisite is you've really got to do your homework, and that means spending time on the ground and talking to people and meeting with people before you invest. And I think that we spent over a year looking at India and making multiple trips with multiple executives before we decided to establish our operations there. The other thing is, of course, that the laws, regulations, and taxes and how they operate need to be fully understood, so that you know exactly how much money is needed to invest, and also how much money you can make, and how. Issues such as double tax agreements, free trade agreements, these sorts of things. All these issues need to be fully discussed, planned out. It's now something, having done for ourselves in India, that's now a service that we, of course, offer now to clients going into new markets. We've been there and done it ourselves, and that's information that we can pass on.
So you mentioned now Korea, Mongolia, India. From a Westerner's perspective, how different are these cultures throughout Asia?
Well, I think there's perhaps in the West a tendency to lump Asia all in one. It's Asia, and while that's undeniably true, it's completely faceted. So you've got all different types of religions in there. The Philippines, for example, is a Catholic religion. There's Buddhist religions. There's Muslim religions. There's atheist, well, not religions, but you know what I mean. So, so lots and lots of different ways of looking at things. Cultures are different. The Indian culture is completely different to the Chinese culture. Language differences, and the people think differently. So again, how to deal with that is really to get those feet on the ground. It's important for the executives to be there. and work out and see and feel firsthand how Asia or your particular country of interest really is, because once you start scratching the surface, you'll find that things are completely different between the West and your country of choice in Asia, and indeed between Asian countries themselves. Not all of them get on, India and Pakistan, but both have opportunities. So how do you handle that if you were to set up operations in both? So these sorts of questions, the geopolitical questions, the cultural questions, so on and so forth, really need to be, can only be answered by perhaps reading the history books, travel guides, of course, but most importantly, executives need to get their boots on the ground and have a real good stomp around to understand what's going on and how that is going to impact your business and impact your own and mold your own executive sensibilities to that new market. It's very, very important.
It's very insightful. So in context of India then, would there be anyone that you'd like us to maybe speak a little bit more with in this session and get more information about that part of Dezan Shira's journey?
Yeah, well, when I was running around India trying to make sense of this amazing, chaotic but fantastic country, I met several people, and I think they'll be appearing on this webinar. Mark Hannant, British guy that runs a successful PR agency. I think we're talking to him. Manjit Kripiani, who runs a very influential think tank in Bombay, Gateway House. They'll be talking, and our own regional director based in Delhi, 𝗀𝗲𝗄𝗃, all good, very, very experienced people that have done it on the ground, know where the intellect is, and can offer insights and advice. So I think that these would be great people for people to listen to, and I believe they're coming on shortly.
Well, great. I look forward to speaking with them, and it'll be fantastic, especially with all these differences in cultures, these differences in regulations, and understanding how to maximize your tax opportunities. These will be great people to speak with.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you very much for your time again, Chris, and I look forward to next month. Hopefully we'll see you back or later on throughout this series.
India has no doubt of medium-sized consulting firms. So the challenge was to differentiate ourselves from them. So we had to do a number of things to be able to achieve this. But what I realized, an important one, was that having come from a medium-sized MNC, it is very difficult to find the mind space and the time to deal with a large number of service providers when you're entering a new country. Typically, you have to work with real estate agents, placement agencies, lawyers, accountants, and a host of other service providers. And you simply don't have the logistical support to be able to deal with such a large number of agents. So I decided, and I felt that we as a firm should be able to offer a comprehensive suite of services to our clients, which would include all of these services, plus the regular specialized traditional services that we do offer. Our clients really appreciated this. They found that all they had to do was come to us, seek our support. We'd find offices for them, find people for them to man their businesses in India, and also make sure that they are compliant as far as tax and regulatory provisions are concerned. So for them, they saved a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of energy in establishing a presence in India.
Having worked with different multinationals is something that you just mentioned. How different was it working for a firm like Dezan Shira?
Well, like most consulting MNCs, Dezan Shira too is multi-location, multicultural, multilingual as a firm, comprising of professionals coming from all parts of the globe. But there are some things which differentiate us from most MNCs. I've seen that offices of MNCs in different countries do not engage with each other to give their clients a seamless experience. They work in silos. So it's very difficult for a client, who's looking to establish or extend in another country Then he has to look for another service provider or chase a completely different set of people in that organization and find it very difficult to coordinate this effort. But we in Dezan Shira, we have 22 offices in Asia. Our teams make it a point to alleviate these apprehensions. We hold hands and we make sure our clients, have a comfortable transition from one country to the other, and we make sure the cultural differences are bridged. Our teams coordinate very efficiently and effectively to make sure the clients have a seamless experience.
Thank you. Could you share maybe some facts about India that might be valuable for international business investors to know about investing there? And also, how do you see the future in terms of opportunities for foreign investors into India?
Well, I think it's common knowledge that India is the world's largest democracy. It was 1.39 billion people. But we also have well-established judiciary, which is very important for successful businesses to feel secure in this environment. We have a young country, which is with a median age of 28.4 years, which means that it's a young population which is looking to be employed and to get jobs and to work in companies which come into the country. Indians are world-class managers. They're world-class organization and team players. And this is very evident. We see Indians running large multinational corporations across the world. And so obviously they have this quality and trait to run businesses and to be a part of teams in companies. We have a cost competitive labor force of nearly 472 million workers, which is a large population of skilled workmen available for companies coming from abroad to establish businesses in India. And I think a very important factor is that the earning, purchasing, and consuming middle class is expected to reach 583 million people by 2026. And this is a huge market for companies wanting to come to India and do business and grow their own business. And this is a great opportunity for them. The government is planning to invest $1.33 trillion in infrastructure. This will give a tremendous boost to downstream industries and services, which will be necessary to fulfill this goal. This represents tremendous opportunities to global businesses to benefit from this investment. India has introduced a productivity-linked incentive scheme, whereby about 4 to 6% incentive is given to companies who come into 13 specified sectors, which is a huge advantage. And of course, for manufacturing companies, the tax rate has been reduced to 15%, which is very competitive and comparable to companies across Asia. And for other companies, the tax rate is 25%. See this in the context that India's GDP is slated to be $3.25 trillion in 2022, which is the current year, and is expected to reach $8.4 trillion by 2026, by 2030, I beg your pardon. By 2026, India will be the third largest global economy behind China and the US. GDP is expected to grow at the rate of 8% in 2022-23, and this momentum is expected to be maintained in the coming years. We in Dezan Shira, India, already see a rapidly growing trend of multinational enterprises wanting to come to India and to take advantage of these emerging opportunities. So in the 30th year of DSA and 75th year of India's independence, I invite you to come to India and take part in this exciting and dramatic growth journey.
Well, thank you very much. I would also like to thank you for these insights, and certainly congratulations on 30 years and on 75 years of India's independence.
Thank you.
The challenges that I face are no different to those which anybody trying to do business in India experiences, and they're essentially around the lack of soft infrastructure. And the fact that, things that we take for granted in the West in terms of your ability to go and set up bank accounts and to gather relevant and reliable data are the things which are absent in a market like India. So it's the hidden costs of doing business. It's the huge amount of time and energy that gets spent on establishment, for example. So I met Chris, I think in 2009 or 2009, and he was in India. And I think, you know, he'd established the business in India probably in around 2007. And I had just moved from the UK and was in the process of setting up an operation here in India. So I was very interested in any of the intelligence and insight that he could share with me, and he was very generous in terms of doing so. We had a shared interest, I think, in India as a huge potential market, fast growing, large and complex. He'd obviously got experience of, you know, a decade and more in China at that stage, probably almost 2 decades. And so a lot more experience on the ground in Asia than I had. And so I was hungry for that kind of experience. Yeah, I mean, I helped Chris by providing some editorial support to his Doing Business in India publication, you know, several years ago. He then, a couple of years later, invited me to come to China. I think he was promoting the fact that, you know, he had now a practice in India, and he invited myself and 𝗵𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁, who runs a think tank here called Gateway House. And I think I was there as the sort of entrepreneurial representative to talk about what it was like on the ground to set up a business. And we did 2 interesting sessions, one in Shanghai and then in Beijing. And I noticed that I've actually got this wine bottle that came from Dadong in Beijing, where we had a fantastic dinner on a Friday evening, and that's retained pride of place in my office. And I've then, over the last 12 years, followed the firm with great interest, and particularly, I would say, through Asia Briefing and the associated titles, which I think are absolutely first-class, world-class pieces of thought leadership, and I think a brilliant way of going to market. That ability to be able to deliver high-value, thoughtful, insightful content on a very regular basis, I think is a brilliant way for a services business to go to market.
Adventurer that is Chris has become the adventurer that is Dezan Shira, that has captured the opportunity, that has processed it and formalized it, and enables others to understand it. And you do this through your India briefing, with the way you talk to your clients. You also, Dezan Shira was an early supporter of Gateway House, the early days. And we so appreciated it because we were also fellow adventurers, and we are leading the navigation. I don't want to say we are navigators, but really, in some sense, we are all leading the navigation, Mark and Chris and Gateway House, and everybody that works for us.